and welcome to this edition of HiBob MAX. My name is Tasha, and I'm a Service Delivery Manager here at Silver Cloud, heading up our HiBob practice. Today, we're going to be talking about data fields and validation. So when implementing systems such as HiBob, this is always like the perfect opportunity to decide what information you're already holding in your legacy system, but also what information you want to continue to hold, which you will import. What information is no longer serving you or maybe out of date. So you'll get the employees to update this when you onboard them, or what new information you want to hold. So lots of systems and lots of clients that I work with who are coming from systems who are a lot more static and a little less engaging. The information that they are holding is just your basics, your bank details, your telephone number, all of the usual stuff. However, within Bob, you can create your own data fields to be able to hold this information. So the new information you might want to hold could be DE&I data or anything like that, which is always a really good one that we're using and adding in as our kind of always the example that we use when we're implementing HiBob. So I'm going to walk you through the work section within an employee profile, because this gives a really good kind of explanation of what a flat field is, what a table field is, and the current dynamic fields in Bob. And once we've done that, I'll then show you what that looks like in the back end, and then we can build that together. So just popping into my profile here and scrolling down to my work section. So this is split into kind of two sections. So I've got my top section here, which is all full of flat fields. There's not tons of info in here at the moment, just it being our demo. And at the bottom, we have our work section, which is actually a table. And this table is completely live. So here you can see my multitude of range of job titles, being my CEO going to head of sales and HRBP. So starting in January 25, we've then moved into the 1st of August 25, and the 4th of August 25 is when this role changed. This green radio button here on the left is going to be telling you what your live line is. So you'll see the history part of that being these two lines under here, but the 4th of August 25 here is the last time my role changed, and that will be then my current line. If we added in a new line starting on the 1st of February 26, for example, that would be in here as a new line on top, but it wouldn't have the green radio button there until it's live. So until that 1st of Feb, which is really helpful because then it means that you can import those changes ahead of time, such as through promotion cycles or compensation cycles, before then you release that before those things go live. Up here at the top, we have there are a couple of dynamic fields. So for example, work anniversary, original start date, and accumulated tenure, and all of these other tenure fields here. And what I mean by dynamic is that they are fed off of a different field within the system. So where I've put in my start date as of the 20th of Jan 25, this will then have picked up that my original start date was also the 20th of Jan 25. So original start date can be used for if you have like a merger and acquisition or a 2P situation. So you can then put in that somebody has been with the business since the 1st of Jan 2020, but actually then when they've joined Silver Cloud as a business, as an example, it would be on the 20th of Jan 25. So then you have this piece in here to still reference that original start date. So that kind of continuous service piece is still reflected. The accumulated tenure will do the same thing and it will calculate from your start date or your original start date, depending on which is earlier, depending on then which field you're using. Work anniversary, so I've been here for a year, for example, in my demo system, and it won't then so in my tenure in years over here, 1.02, but my work anniversary in years is I am in my first year. So that's why that's like that. So now that we've got these and seen this section within the employee profile, I'm going to show you what that looks like in the back end in order to then build those things yourself. So using my top tip in Bob, and my favorite place in Bob is my search bar at the top here. So if I type in data fields, it will take me straight to where I want to go. This is a really good thing if you know where you want to go in the system, but you're not quite sure. Bob's a really big system. There's lots of different spaces for you to go and find different pieces of info. So this is a really good one. I use this for permission groups all the time, and I can come in here and view my permission groups. But then if I just want to go to my data fields, I can do the same. We have our people's data fields. At the top left-hand corner, we have our search fields, tables, and categories. So if I know that I have a field in here that I want to be able to edit or add a bit more of a description to, for example, then I can do that in here. So if I search for phone, it will bring me up all of the fields that are in this section that have the word phone within it. So if I wanted to change that to personal phone, I've got in here, I've got personal mobile already, but actually if I wanted to call that home phone, for example, I can click edit here and just change that to the top right hand corner here. I can, with all of the fields that Bob have created in the system already, Bob already have got a multitude of fields that are already in the system for you. Some of those might not serve your purpose. So for example, in the payroll section, when you have a new Bob system, there is the tax code is in here as a Bob generated field. If you're not using UK payroll, or you aren't going to be using tax codes within the system because they update so regularly, as we know, then you can archive this field just by clicking archive here on the right hand side. When I do archive that, it never really removes it, hence archiving. And top right hand corner here, I can flick between my active fields and archived. So then if that was something I was going to use in the future, or we do then bring in UK payroll as a system, for example, I can then update and restore that, and it will put that exactly back to where it was before. And in here, you can see, so within when Bob creates an account for you at the very basic, you have your basic info, address, home, emergency contact details, all of the things you'd expect to see in those categories. However, you can create your own too. So again, it really allows you to be able to create your system specific for your organization in the language of your organization that feels a lot more authentic and a lot more you as a business. So add category here, I can then just create a DE&I section or a equal ops section, whatever you want to call that element. That's the way that we would do that. Another really great thing, and you'll see these here underneath, like about me, visible to all, can't turn off, visible to all, and some of the others. So equal employment opportunity, you can add in that description field. Not so needed for HR admins and things like that, but actually what it can really be used for, and I've seen it used a lot internally and with other clients, is within a category such as the DE&I section. If you then start asking for things like gender, identity, religion, and all of the other things that come into that, there's a risk that some people might go, hang on a second, why are you asking me this information? So actually, if we then were to add a description around that field and that category that you're asking them, it just gives a little bit more context. So for example, what I've done before with the DE&I section is I've added just a little bit that says, this isn't visible to anyone, just to everybody. This is just a way of collecting that data so that we as a HR team can tailor our products and services to our ever diverse workforce. This won't ever be, and just to give that kind of context as to who that information is going to be shared for and why that information is given. So internally, that's how we do that currently. So I've created my data field showcase category for you all. And in here, I then have that split between category fields and category tables. So where we saw those flat fields on top before and the category tables underneath. So now we've got those kind of fields piece in here, and we've understanding the difference between a field and a category and a table. You can create your new fields just up here at the top right hand corner. First thing I'm asked for is what's the name of my field. So in this instance, I'm just going to call this my type. I will then start choosing what type of field I've got here. So I'm going to walk you through each of these, but first of all, I'm going to start with a text field. This text field here is exactly the same size as this name field here. So this is what that's going to look like within the employee profile. So it's the same as this name size here. Text area is the same size as this description field here. So it's going to give you a little bit more context and a little bit more room to add more additional pieces and additional information. With both the text area and the text fields, as well as the number field, which is again the same size as your name format here and will only take numbers, shock and horror. We have here our additional and brand new for January of 26, which is super exciting, is validations. So many of my clients have been crying out for validation where, for example, like a few fields in HiBob at the moment have been created with internal validation, like hard-coded, such as NI number. So it needs to be the usual 9 characters in length, but with letters and numbers. Bob have now added and implemented the same ability to be built by clients in the system, which is so exciting and really cried out for. So it just gives more control over the data that your employees are adding in. So the text area validations, they're pretty simple, but they're centered around character count. So my validations here, so I can limit my character count. So if I just wanted that to be more than 3, or for bank details, for example, sort codes in the UK are 6 digits. So if I want that to be more than 6 digits, it will always be more than 6. I also can match a specific pattern. So for example, if I'm using this for, Bob already has an employee ID section, but if you have a payroll ID as well as your employee IDs within your organization, you can use the match a specific pattern to be able to, I guess, ensure that the way that is being put in is in the right format for what you need it to be. So for example, there's a couple of already a list of patterns in here already that Bob have kind of created, which are great. So like alphanumeric, where it could just be an A1, B, 2C. Emails, where it will need to have an @ symbol. The IBAN numbers will need to have additional pieces in here, phone numbers, etc. What's really good is actually that Bob have this custom pattern piece where you will use AI. And having played around with this a little today, I've been able to build in here. So if I want the pattern to start with 2 letters and finish with 3 numbers. So my payroll IDs are going to be AB123. Where I put that in my generate, Bob has created that code for me already in order to hard code the system in the background. And it's created the error message. So if that message, or if the input is wrong, this is the error message that it will create. So once I'm happy with that, if I choose use, I now have the option at the bottom to test that rule. So rather than create a field, come back out again, go into the employee profile, and then come back in to test that out, this test rules piece is super useful. So if I was to pop in here, and so it's got the name of my field here, so full name. I know we're not using it for that, but that's fine. So if I put in my AB, it's already telling me this must start with 2 letters and end with 3 numbers. So I'm already missing my 3 numbers here. So if I my 1, 2, 3. If I was then to type in UK 567, it knows that it's valid. So it will always want that 2 letters at the start and 3 numbers at the end. And that is my validation for the text and text area fields. The number fields is really similar. So I'm just going to go in and create a new one for numbers. And validation. So again, I've got my number range validation. So that could be a more than, a less than, or a between. But my match a specific pattern, again, could be in the exact same way if that is a set or a specific number of numbers or in a specific order, for example. The thing to remember with a number field, though, is that it will always, similar with all numbering systems like Excel, if you're putting in a number and you have a telephone number of 07, for example, your first O will drop off. So if you're using this for telephone numbers or bank details, you will need to use a text field for this, because then it will always have remembered that it won't need to drop off that first 0. It's one that catches a lot of people out. So next, we have our list options. So list options and multi-lists are probably one of my favorite ones because I think they're so diverse and you can use them all in so many different ways. So I'm going to go through loads now with you and really probably bore you. So single option lists can be used for where the answer is only one thing. So within my list here, the first thing it will ask me is which list do you want to use? So I can create a brand new one, and that could just be an instance of yes, no, or maybe, or countries, or, you know, whatever you want that single list option to be. But this list will only be used in the instance that you only have one answer. Bob have already got a load of lists already in the system as well, which is really helpful. So the select a list from one of your entities could be things that you've already got in the system. Bob have already built plenty of these in the system already. So if we go into title, for example, it will then bring us into all of our titles here. And you can add to those lists and make as many as you want here, for example. If I then save that, it's now updated that there were 6 options in there. Now there are 7. And when I hit, I can, unfortunately at the moment, we can't validate those. And advanced, which are on all types of fields, you can choose whether this is a mandatory field. So when somebody comes to this part in their profile, they have to fill that in. They can't move on without it. If they want to mask values with an asterisk. So if we're using the titles as an example, or pronouns, for example, you might not want that to be wildly visible on somebody's profile, but only in the instance that there is it will mask it with an asterisk and a little eye, a figure of an eye. So then you will be able to click that and then it will show it. So it adds that kind of that extra layer of protection. It's currently in a system used for salaries at the moment. So I could be, as a HR professional, sharing my screen, scrolling down somebody's profile, but not want to show somebody the salary. Then I have that extra layer of protection that it's not just going to be there and invisible. I have that eye to be able to then show that when I need to. Applies to. This is really helpful for global businesses. So I'm working with a client at the moment who have Australia, but they also have people in the UK. So in the UK, for example, we know all of our bank details, we know our sort code, account number, etc. In Australia, they're using much different numbers. They're using a Swift code and sometimes an IBAN code, depending on what part of Australia you're in. So those parts there are really useful, that you can add these categories and add these fields into the system. But actually, if I only want them to be seen in the UK, I can choose all of my UK sites. Or if this is an IBAN number and I know that they use those in Istanbul and Hong Kong, I can choose those. So now if I am in the UK and I go onto my profile, I won't see that as an option to fill into my profile, whereas I will if I am in Hong Kong or Istanbul. Amazing. The next one is multi-list. So this is a list where it may have multiple options, such as nationality, or I love this one for smaller organizations for things such as like asset lists. So where upon someone joining your organization, when you're creating the employee profile, you can choose all of the types of equipment they might have. Or I've seen other clients use this for like systems that employees may need access to, different project management tools or payroll systems, for example. In doing this, I would just create my and choose my multi-list. And again, I have the same way to be able to create my multi-list. So this could be for my assets. So headphones, laptop, mouse, keyboard. What I can do here, and this is one of those really great tips and tricks to do, is with headphones, laptop, mouse, keyboard, screen, I've just added those as a list here. What I've seen lots of people do is they just put headphones and hit save, and it's created the list item. They've hit add, and they've been able to add screen here and hit save. That's really long, that's really laborious. Let's not do that. So I'm going to delete these here. And instead, if I have a list of these and I hit add in here, I can then copy and paste those in. As long as they are on separate lines, when I hit save, it will create me 5 options. Another way I've seen people use this as definitely a time-saving exercise is that they've used an AI tool to give them the top 10 list of reasons why people may be sick in the UK, if you're correct, collecting reasons for being poorly. Or we used this recently for a client who was collecting languages that their employees spoke. So they asked an AI tool, what are the top 20 languages spoken in the UK? And then they copied and pasted that whole list from their AI tool into here. So then when people join the business, they were able to select all of the languages that they speak, for example, which works really well in ClubView as a system, because within the ClubView, you can search for those languages and you will be able to see the amount of people who speak those languages. So if you need a Mandarin speaker, you can search for Mandarin speaker and it will show you all of those people who fit that bit. The next ones then are around currency. So currency is a space for essentially a monetary figure and a choice of currency to be added. So clients have used this for employee costs or FTE salary figures, or even costs of training for employee clawback schemes, which works really well. So then you keep a track of how much that has cost you. So then when that employee leaves or needs to pay that back, you then have that record in there already for you. Employee reference. Those who have implemented with me will know just how useful I find this. I think an employee reference field, when it comes to permissions, flows, tasks, are so useful to be able to create a relationship between the employee profile that you're in and somebody else in the business, such as a onboarding buddy, a HRBP, an IT support, a payroll manager, all of these sorts of things that can really help then, again, create that one, onboarding experience for everybody, but two, really personalize the alerts and the emails and the tasks for people across the system. So when creating an employee reference field, I click employee reference. This will now ask me who can appear in that reference dropdown. So I don't just want everybody to be in there. If I just wanted this to be people who are in a specific department. So this could be my customer service representative. I know I've got my customer service and hit apply. So I've now got 7 employees who are in that customer service employee department. So when I drop down that option, I will see all those 7 people in there. The next one is around a hierarchical list. If I even scratch the surface of this today, we'd be here for hours. But essentially this can create organizational structure or dependent lists. However, Bob recently, or about 2 years ago, incorporated and injected job catalog. I definitely see this, the hierarchical list, used less often now because the job catalog links to so much more. So where you would be able to create your job family framework, your leveling across the business. I sit in HR, but there's an L&D, there's a people team, there's a recruitment team, and then leveling those out again. Those things there are now built more so within the job catalog, but hierarchical lists we've seen used previously as well. And last but not least is documents. This can be used just simply to upload specific documents onto employees' profiles. So this will save in the employee profile as well as in their document section. So you can view the document within the profile, within the context you need it for. Again, such as kind of relating back to training certificates, I could add my certificate once it's been completed. It will sit in the employees' documents folder, but also then within the employee profiles, like a quick view. Or work eligibility visas. This is another really good one for that. I just wanted to show you a couple of ways that we've used these fields within the system previously. I've just bumped them to the top of my profile here. Benefits, where we've created a benefits section to create a multitude of data points so that if I wanted to pull a really quick report for people who are opted into the pension or opted into healthcare, for example, these things are then in here. We've used this as well for training, as we said before, authorization to recruit, and about that hiring process and really bringing that out. If we don't have the hiring module, you can do those authorization to recruit within the system. So me and my team have done so many of these. These are just, like I say, scratching the surface. Emergency contacts, expression of wish for those with life assurance policies. And we've been able to then set up flows around these to automate the self-service element of this, as well as the kind of automation of the processes on the back of these things to save time for busy people teams already managing a huge BAU workload. For changing of bank details or changing of address that I did in my previous HiBob MAX video, we were able to automate that process around, I've changed my address as an employee. My people team don't necessarily need to see that, but my payroll team do, because they then need to update 3 other systems. So that then skips over the HR team who traditionally would have had that really ingrained in them day to day, and now they don't necessarily need to see that unless they need to by going into the employee profile. Here at Silver Cloud, we're consulting differently every day for each of our clients' individual needs. I hope you found this session really helpful. We look forward to seeing you next time, but please reach out if there's anything that we can do to support your teams around implementation to support or upskill training or specific processes or ongoing managed services similar to a traditional consultancy. Thanks so much. Have a good day.